So we have the official patch notes for patch 1.1.1. Not a lot has really changed for the Necromancer. We have them up on Maxroll here from our news team, headed by Dreadscythe on Facebook, doing a fantastic job with this, might I say. The Necromancer changes are the exact same of what we were expecting before. But there are very important bug fixes that I think actually touch on a couple different builds in very unique ways. And I wanted to touch on those ones for people who are looking to play different Necromancer builds this season. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into those and the implications of what's actually happening because of them. And now we get to the Necromancer specific bug fixes. So the first one here is that there will now be a max cap of blood orbs, which are active for any Necromancer, which is capped at 30. This is similar to crackling energy like on the Sorceress. Apparently every single Necromancer, and you could see this a lot if you were like in Hell Tides, you just had access to like every single blood orb that was all up at the same time. So you would use Blood Lance with Gore Quills and you would just see Blood Lances flying from off of the screen to come hit targets. So now there's a max cap to like blood orbs that your character has instanced at any given time. So RIP to the just infinite fields of Blood Lances from Gore Quills. This is incredibly important and almost makes me upset that I've just recently swapped off from my blood build, but they've officially fixed the issue where the guaranteed overpower attacks from Rathma's Vigor actually would not proc off of Bloodbath in your Paragon boards, which means that like Blood Wave should do significantly more damage. Your ability to use Blood Mist with Rathma's Vigor is now going to get the appropriate plus 50% damage increase on Overpower. So Blood Mist is going to become even more powerful for single target damage and might just like completely eviscerate high level targets that previously you would kind of get halfway through their health and then have to finish them off with Blood Lance. So I'm excited to see just how much more powerful Blood Mist becomes in the overall rotation, where it was already like a top tier contender for actions you wanted to take in combat. But it's awesome to know that this legendary node finally works with the thing that says that it guarantees an overpower. Another amazing change to Blood Lance, and the only issue here is I'm not sure where you fit it into the build at this time. But Untimely Death, the way that this worked previously is that you would overheal up to this maximum bonus of 60. And then when you would use Blood Lance, like let's say I had 3 targets lanced, when you would use Blood Lance on that target, only the monster that you hit with the actual lance would get this bonus damage. The other 2 lances would just do your base overpower damage, which basically meant that Untimely Death was a non-use, like a non-starter. In blood builds, another issue was with Blood Surge. So if you had this bonus and you use Blood Surge first does a very low damage drain effect to the entire screen, and that would consume the bonus from Untimely Death. And then the actual surge itself would not benefit from it at all. And then on top of that, if you had the aspect that made it so you surged twice, the secondary surge wouldn't benefit from it at all. So now, theoretically, Untimely Death makes it so that you get that bonus on all 3 of those surges, and I'd be even more interested to see whether or not Untimely Death now applies to the surges on your Bone Prison and on your minions from Deathspeaker's Amulet, and that might, like, drastically push the Blood Surge as a whole, which was already pretty powerful, just way over the top as far as, like, damage output is concerned. Considering that Blood Surge, like the base skill, heals you on use. So it's literally constantly powering Untimely Death for the caster. And this on top of Temerity, which also benefits from overhealing by generating your barrier, which again, then protects your life and your fortified totals, means that like blood builds just got much more significantly powerful. And I'm wondering which aspects you're willing to toss off from the build to be able to use it to its fullest. And we'll have to kind of see. Like on Blood Lance, it's already so tight that I'm not sure that there is an aspect to drop, literally, other than like dropping a shield, which would be a huge damage loss because you'd lose the max life, or just dropping Potent Blood altogether and strictly gaining your resource off of Hemorrhage and Essence on Kill effects like in the Bone Graft Paragon board. But look out for blood builds gaining like a really powerful new tool that might go on to shape how the entirety of the build functions. They are finally going to be fixing Imperfectly Balanced, meaning that you'll be able to put more than 1 point into it. So for everybody who's been wondering why they changed this skill, it was a bug. They were already quoted saying that they were going to fix this, but for me personally, this means that I no longer have to answer this question roughly once every 10 minutes. So I'm eternally grateful to the devs for fixing the thing that broke for no ding dang reason, but it'll be nice to actually have all of these core skill focused builds regaining that additional 10% multiplicative damage, and people are going to have to get used to not having those 2 additional skill points in their skill tree. So you're going to see a lot of these like 7 skill builds where they took Decrepify off of the skill bar probably need to come back down to earth to be able to actually get the benefit on their core skill that they would expect. Or maybe we've all gotten so used to it that people just abandon Imperfectly Balanced on some builds. It's one of the only multipliers for a blood build, so I don't see it happening there. But maybe you just go, I don't need the multiplier. I'm enjoying having this other skill on my skill bar far too much. Well, I'll be interested to see how much people revert to and readjust to being able and needing to put the 2 additional points in here. Now, here are some changes that I guess only affect console players and me playing on computer with a controller. Shoutouts to all my people out there who are old millennials who are still playing these games and have carpal tunnel. The spur ability while mounted while using a controller is finally going to go the same speed as it did on keyboard and mouse. Turns out you're literally just slower while playing with controller. And I'm so excited that I actually get to move around the world on a Necromancer, which was already so starved for mobility, at the same speed as everybody else. I'm less of a second-class citizen just because I have an injury that stops me from being able to play mouse and keyboard. I'm glad to see that change. This was probably one of the funniest things, and maybe only the Necromancers dealt with this on a day-to-day basis, but you could actually use a fear effect to make it so that the invasion portals and Helltide events literally ran away from the event. They would just be here and then just scoot away if they had a fear effect applied to them. So now that won't just be ruining events across Helltides, and you won't have to be chasing down portals. Different objects in dungeons also could be feared, so hopefully it just kind of fixes it across the board. So it'll be nice to see that, not having to chase down inanimate objects from my fear effects. Another really interesting bug fix, which also helps us to slightly better understand how the game is coded, fixed an issue where post-death damaging effects, so monsters that would explode, were apparently ignoring damage reduction from stats of close and distant enemies. They apparently were doing so much additional damage because of a bug where they were not properly recognizing distance and just ignoring that damage reduction type. So now you might actually be able to survive these things, and maybe they weren't doing as much damage as we thought they were. They just were inappropriately calculating how much to apply to the target. Another great thing, which became a huge problem for me pre-season while pushing high nightmare dungeons on Bone Spear, it's that the elite enemies that have the teleporter affix would teleport to you from off screen where you literally physically could not see them, and also deal excessive amounts of damage with this teleport, just one-shotting you, which basically meant I had to blood mist every 1.5 screens to potentially avoid this when going through a nightmare dungeon. So luckily now this should be easier to manage. You should at least be able to see them before they teleport on top of you. And I believe this verbiage states that their damage is also being reduced because they were doing inappropriate amounts of damage by using this ability. Fantastic change here. Tusk charges, so any monster that could charge was still able to deal damage to you, even if you interrupted their charge or they were dead, which was a huge problem on Necromancer because Corpse Tendrils pulls monsters from all around to a single spot. And if a charger was pulled through you by Corpse Tendrils, it would immediately apply its charge damage and one-shot you the vast majority of the time. So it's good to see that problem be removed from the game so that you are not being penalized for successfully managing a combat scenario. Sadly, and I guess try to get this in while you still can, although you really shouldn't be using anything that could be described as an exploit. It's not super important right now, but it will be once, actual leaderboards exist. They are fixing the problem where you could continuously fight Varshan at the end and not turn in the quest just by resetting, and then continuously get Wrathful Hearts out of him. So I guess if you haven't done that and nobody's looking, go get your hearts, but that will be fixed in the patch so that people can't keep abusing that for power farming Wrathful Hearts early and easily. And they'll actually have to do the rest of the seasonal content to get the hearts like the rest of us. Another really big change here, which is super important because what we've realized with using the Barber, and if you don't know, basically the Barber, once it is procced, causes a problem where some lucky hit abilities do not work on it. So lucky hit, chance to restore essence, or resource in general on gloves does not work with the Barber. Other, most notably, effects like Shielding Storm can't generate barrier for the Necromancer when the Barber is in effect. They fixed an issue where the Barber would absorb damage from everybody doing damage to the target. and then only show the damage to the person who triggered the heart's ability. This meant that other players who were choosing to not use the Barber because it had these negative impacts on their builds or different skills that they wanted to use were still being penalized in group play scenarios, especially on world bosses. So now only the person using the heart will actually get the ability of the stored damage and the trigger effect. I imagine this is going to cause some problems in group play still, because the Barber also pre-explodes if the damage would reach its current life total. And since it would absorb damage from everybody, I assumed like that calculation was very easy for the game to do. Whereas now, since other targets are able to apply their damage while it's ticking up, I assume it's going to cause some weird explosion issues. So if you run into that, let's make sure to get those bugs reported in. But if we just assume everything will work properly now, it basically means that the Barber is a choice that individual players make for their own builds and won't be negatively impacting other people, again, in these group play and world boss open world scenarios. Now, I don't think that this means it's all of a sudden going to work with every single lucky hit ability and every single on hit ability. In fact, I doubt much else has been changed about the Barber, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was like some weird rolling repercussions of this coding logic. Like maybe by fixing this, they also realized that some other things were turned off. So there's like a, I don't know, maybe like a 10% chance some of those issues, if they are issues, is resolved in the patch as well. So we'll have to retest just to make sure. I'm really excited about the different bug fixes that are in here because they are addressing at least some of the problems with blood builds. Then, we've been banging that drum for a long time. Most notably, the change to Bloodbath and Rathma's Vigor, again, just means that 2 of our skills that could not benefit from this at all, and we're just kind of like still good enough, now we're going to get a massive buff. I'm really excited to try out the new unique item designs. You will have to drop them again once the patch goes live, so you can hoard them for right now for their unique abilities, and you might as well collect one so that you always have that in the Eternal Realm. Like, I have a 1.1.0 temerity that has incredibly bad stats on it. And you can be snooty like the rest of us who are going to be keeping ours. But I hope that this helps put some of this into context for you to better understand what the impact on the Necromancer meta is going to be at the very least. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.